What happens when forgiveness turns into a burden too heavy to carry, when the one you vowed to love and protect shatters your faith beyond repair? In a tragic and terrifying twist, Atlanta preacher Pastor Robert Davies has done the unthinkable. The man who preached redemption and grace to his congregation could no longer turn a blind eye to the betrayal festering within his own home. His wife, the woman who once stood beside him in the eyes of God, had been hiding behind the walls of his church, concealing sins too devastating to forgive. And in a moment of unbearable pain, he chose a path no man of God should ever walk, leaving behind a crime so gruesome it shook the very foundation of his faith. Mrs. Lauren Robert managed to hide behind the church's shadows until blackmail exposed her, leading to her brutal death at the hands of the very man she once called her husband. Before we unravel this twisted tale, be sure to like and subscribe to True Crime Arena for more chilling stories that expose the darkest truths hidden behind the fake smiles of those we trust and love. 37-year-old Pastor Robert Davies was a man greatly honored by all. He was so dedicated to the church, people see him as a role model, and couples who had issues in their marriages do go to him to seek counseling. Aside from being in the church, he was also a successful businessman. He owned a private clinic which his younger brother managed, but he had a problem: his wife. In mid-April 2013, Pastor Robert Davies met Lauren during one of his church outreach programs. She wasn't interested in being preached to and dismissed him without hesitation. But as Robert walked away, she suddenly called out to him and asked for his phone number. He handed it to her without questioning why. A few weeks later, Lauren showed up at the church, and what followed left everyone in shock. After Robert Davies prayed with Lauren, she fell to her knees, weeping and pleading for God's mercy. At that moment, Robert didn't fully understand why, but later, Lauren confided in him. She opened up about her past, admitting she had lived her entire life as a prostitute and felt nothing but disappointment in herself. Robert comforted her, offering words of encouragement. Then, with a heavy heart, Lauren asked, "Can God ever forgive a loose woman?" Robert smiled and gently assured her, "God is merciful. He forgives anyone who sincerely seeks His forgiveness." And so began Lauren's journey to Christ. Lauren became a regular at church, attending every service and immersing herself in the teachings of Christ. With each passing day, she grew closer to Robert, who watched her transformation with admiration. He felt deeply fulfilled, believing he had led a lost soul back to God. If only he had known better. What started as a spiritual awakening slowly evolved into something else, something Robert never saw coming. The bond between them deepened, and soon, he found himself caught in a struggle he never imagined facing. On one side, there was his duty as a pastor, his commitment to seeing Lauren as a redeemed soul, nothing more. On the other, there was his heart, betraying him, pulling him toward the very woman he once saw only as a lost sinner. Could he truly look beyond her past? Could he allow himself to love a woman the world once labeled as unworthy? Love, they say, is a beautiful thing. It can heal, restore, and bring two hearts together. But what happens when that same love does not just hurt but destroys? In August of that same year, Robert made a choice, one that could have been avoided. He decided to take Lauren as his wife, choosing to look beyond her past and the consequences that could come with it. But what no one knew was that Robert was not the happy, fulfilled man people believed him to be. Behind his respected image was a secret, one that had kept him single all these years. A secret that, once revealed, would change everything. He expressed his intentions to Lauren, and she accepted him without hesitation. Though his family strongly opposed his decision, believing that a man of his faith should not marry a woman with her past, Robert stood firm. He reminded them that God looks beyond sin, offering redemption through sacrifice. And just as God's sacrifice was rooted in love, it was love that led him to choose Lauren despite her past. Trouble began in 2014, shortly after Robert married Lauren. On their wedding night, Lauren wasn't just disappointed, she was shocked. Robert had kept a secret from her, one she never could have imagined. Robert had no desire to be intimate with his wife. He tried to change, to push himself past whatever held him back, but it was a struggle he couldn't overcome. Though he questioned himself, wondering if there was something deeper behind his condition, he knew one thing for certain: he had never felt any attraction toward the same sex. Yet, the truth remained: he was a husband who could not fulfill his role, and that reality began to fracture their marriage. Lauren knew she couldn't walk away from the marriage. Returning to her old life was not an option. So, she chose to stay. Robert, wanting to make things right, assured her that he would get intimate with her and other to make babies. Lauren threw herself into church life, eager to create something meaningful, or so everyone thought. She spearheaded outreach programs and became a prominent figure within the congregation. Just as it seemed she had found her purpose, her past resurfaced, unraveling the stability she had built. In March 2017, Pastor Robert proposed the idea of adopting a baby. Lauren initially agreed, but as her husband began preparing, she dropped a bombshell: she couldn't bring herself to adopt a child when she could carry one herself. This revelation shocked Robert, as she had never mentioned this during their years of marriage. That March marked the beginning of the end of their once healthy relationship. Lauren began voicing frustrations about Robert's inability to be intimate with her, lamenting the strain it placed on their marriage. It was the first time she had ever raised concerns about his condition. She went so far as to threaten him, demanding a medical report explaining his lack of sexual activity. If he refused, she warned, she would publicly accuse him of being a gay pastor in front of the entire congregation. That was a blow Pastor Robert couldn't ignore. He had dedicated his entire life to serving God, and he wasn't about to let his marriage derail his calling. Robert finally confessed to Lauren that he had never been attracted to the opposite sex. Beyond the church, he couldn't bear the thought of becoming a headline with scandalous hashtags. Lauren, unable to produce any medical report to explain his condition, was left with no evidence to support her claims. But there was more to the story, a painful lie buried beneath the surface. When Robert was just 9 years old, he was molested by someone he once called his aunt. The trauma haunted him for years, compounded by the fact that his family never sought justice for what had happened. As he grew older and realized the extent of the damage she had inflicted, he distanced himself from his family, maintaining a relationship only with his younger brother. When Robert turned 26, he decided to confront the trauma that had haunted him since childhood. He sued his aunt, Dorothy Davies, for molesting him. With the help of his therapist, who provided detailed testimony about the lasting psychological damage, and his younger brother, who corroborated the abuse and the family's refusal to seek justice, Robert built a strong case. The court ruled in his favor, and Dorothy was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Robert made a vow to never let a woman into his life until Lauren came along and changed everything. On the day of the verdict, Robert felt a fleeting sense of closure. But little did he know, an enemy was watching, someone he never expected to turn against him. This person, hidden in the shadows, had their reasons for wanting revenge. They waited patiently, biding their time for the perfect moment to strike back at Robert, setting the stage for a confrontation that would test him in ways he couldn't yet imagine. A new member, Victor, joined the church, and his arrival sent a chill through Lauren. They shared a dark past. He knew her as the woman she once was, far removed from her pious image now. A dangerous secret bound them, one that could destroy her if revealed. Victor, with his sly smiles and veiled threats, began to manipulate her, reminding her of the power he held. Lauren, trapped and terrified, had no choice but to comply. But as his demands grew bolder, the tension between them simmered, threatening to explode. Lauren's double life began to unravel, and she knew one wrong move could turn their secret into a bloody reckoning. Lauren told Robert she was visiting her family, a lie that slipped easily from her lips. But instead of heading home, she boarded a plane with Victor, leaving behind the life she had built. For 2 weeks, they disappeared into a world far removed from the church, a world where Lauren's past and present collided in a dangerous dance. Victor's presence was a constant reminder of the secret they shared, a secret so volatile it could destroy everything. Their days were a blur of tension and unease. Victor's control was absolute, his every word a veiled threat. Lauren played her part, but beneath her compliance, a storm brewed. She knew this couldn't last, Victor's grip was tightening, and the risk of exposure grew with each passing day. The weight of her double life pressed down on her, but she had no choice. To defy Victor was to invite chaos, and chaos would be bloody. As the 2 weeks ended, Lauren returned to the church, her mask firmly back in place. But the cracks were there, hidden beneath her smile. She had stepped into the shadows with Victor, and now the shadows threatened to consume her. The clock was ticking, and Lauren knew the reckoning was coming, one way or another. When Lauren came back, Robert felt something wasn't right. Her story seemed too perfect, and she acted too calm. For the first time, he started to doubt her. Wanting to fix things, he decided to try being intimate with her, something he'd avoided for years. But it was too late. Robert's doubts grew. He noticed little things like Lauren jumping at sudden sounds and avoiding his gaze. He could tell she was hiding something big. Their intimacy didn't bring them closer, it only made him more certain that their marriage was falling apart. Something was wrong, and Robert knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. The tension in Robert's household had reached a breaking point, spilling over into his life and the church. His attempts to reconnect with Lauren had failed, leaving him desperate. In a last-ditch effort, he proposed a deal: he would try to be intimate with her, but only if she agreed to adopt a child. Lauren, however, exploded in anger. She accused him of deceiving her into marriage, knowing he was impotent, and criticized him for refusing to seek medical help or provide any proof of his condition. The argument left their relationship more fractured than ever. Weeks later, Lauren discovered she was pregnant. It was a bittersweet revelation, joy mixed with dread. She couldn't share the news with Robert. Victor's hold over her was too strong, his threats too real. Bound by the dark secret they shared, Lauren felt trapped. In the end, she made a heartbreaking decision and quietly ended the pregnancy, burying the truth along with it. The weight of her choices hung heavy, and the storm brewing in her life showed no signs of calming. Victor didn't stop there. He began to control Lauren as if she belonged to him. Lauren begged him, saying a sexual relationship was the last thing she had ever expected from him, but Victor coldly replied that the only thing his money could buy was a sexual affair with her, and that was all he wanted. He grew bolder, inserting himself into her life to the point where he could see her whenever he pleased. Not long after, Lauren had her first abortion for Victor. When she became pregnant a second time, she thought about telling her husband and keeping the baby, but the fear of his reaction held her back. In the end, she quietly ended the pregnancy again, bearing the weight of her decisions alone. Victor persisted, but each time Lauren became pregnant, she quickly got rid of the baby before he could notice. One could only wonder what a woman like Lauren, trapped in such a situation, could do to free herself from the bondage she found herself in. But the question remained: was she unaware of the chains binding her, or was she simply playing along? Or was she the enemy targeting Robert all along? 5 times, Lauren got rid of her pregnancies, all for Victor, and he showed no signs of stopping. Desperate, she began seeking help, but for someone like Lauren, it wasn't easy to find. When she grew tired of the sham she called a marriage, she finally confronted Robert. She told him to forget about providing any medical proof of his condition and instead focus on building intimacy in their marriage so they could have children. Robert agreed, but beneath the surface, Lauren was an unhappy, frustrated woman. Robert's cold treatment during their attempts at intimacy became unbearable, and Lauren chose to abstain altogether. Her life felt like a never-ending cycle, and the only option she saw was to turn herself into the police. The weight of her sins was crushing, growing heavier each day as she faced the consequences of choices she never intended to make. By 2019, Lauren had aborted 13 times and was a few weeks pregnant again. Victor, reflecting on the years, began to wonder why she had never shown signs of pregnancy despite their repeated encounters. He started tracking her, following her every move but found no clues, until he discovered her secret visits to an abortion clinic. Using this information, he threatened to expose her, vowing to reveal the truth about who she was and how she had manipulated her way into Robert's life. Overwhelmed, Lauren broke down and confessed that she had already had 13 abortions and was currently pregnant again. Victor made Lauren a deal: she could either keep the baby this time, or he would expose her secret to the public. Fed up with his threats, Lauren finally snapped and told Victor to go ahead and reveal her secret, adding that it wouldn't matter because his lies would also come to light. On May 3, 2019, Robert received a message on his phone stating that the enemy he had been searching for was, in fact, his wife. Robert had always known he had an enemy, but the idea of it being Lauren seemed impossible. He confronted her, but she denied everything. Then, a second message arrived, instructing Robert to take Lauren for a pregnancy test and revealing that the baby wasn't his. It also mentioned her 13 previous abortions, none of which were for him. Shocked that someone not only had his email but was also making such claims about his wife, Robert confronted Lauren again. This time, she broke down and told him the truth, blaming Robert for everything. Though it was a bitter pill to swallow, Robert made her swear that as long as they remained married, her involvement with other men and her abortion history would never become public. But an enemy doesn't stop until they are either eliminated or achieve their goal. On May 4, 2019, the police arrested Victor. Unbeknownst to him, Robert had locked Lauren in their room and taken over her phone after she confessed to the abortions and carrying another man's child. Robert's investigation led him to Victor. Just before his arrest, Victor had printed 50 flyers featuring Lauren's face, labeling her as a skimmer, and detailing her 13 abortions and current pregnancy with another man's child. He planned to use them to threaten Lauren, but luck ran out. As he fled, the bag containing the flyers fell open, and the wind scattered them everywhere. People quickly recognized Lauren and the flyers spread like wildfire, sparking conversations and gossip. By May 5, 2019, Robert's phone was flooded with over 100 calls. Some callers wanted confirmation about the news of his wife's abortions and pregnancy, while others mocked him for being a pastor unable to maintain a peaceful home. Victor, now in police custody, confirmed the truth about Lauren, hinting that there was even more to her story. Robert continued to receive harsh comments, with some accusing him of having Victor arrested to silence him and hide Lauren's secrets. Then, a chilling message arrived on Robert's phone: his end would be so tragic that he would regret ever being born. Out of anger and frustration, Robert dismembered his wife, showing no regard for the innocent baby in her womb. In one brutal act, he ended 2 lives, destroying the home the unborn child would have known. Robert couldn't bear the thought of living with lifelong trauma, having avoided women for so long, only for the one woman he loved to become the downfall of the church he had built. The scandal spreading across social media was more than he could face. Residents demanded Robert's arrest, and as he was led away in handcuffs, he glanced back at the house he once called home, realizing he might never walk through its doors as a free man again. When questioned about why he had Victor arrested, Robert explained that he suspected Victor was blackmailing his wife and had traced him to uncover the truth. Investigators took over, digging into Victor's motives for blackmailing the late Lauren. What they uncovered shocked everyone and revealed a betrayal no one saw coming. Victor was linked to George Davies, the brother of Dorothy Davies and Robert's uncle. George had become Robert's sworn enemy after Robert sent Dorothy to prison for molesting him as a child. George had spent years in pain, watching his sister behind bars, and vowed revenge. He tried to ruin Robert by sending women to seduce him or infiltrate his church, but Robert never fell for it. When Lauren came into the picture, George saw an opportunity. She had been his mistress, but when he ran out of ways to destroy Robert, he offered her a deal: he would buy her a house if she brought Robert down. The plan was to set Robert up by having him seduced and photographed, but it evolved into getting Lauren pregnant by another man so they could use a DNA test to destroy his reputation. Victor was brought in to execute the plan, but he went rogue, demanding a sexual relationship with Lauren instead of sticking to the original scheme. When Lauren reported Victor's actions to George, he abandoned her, telling her she was in too deep and had to see it through, no matter the cost. Lauren realized she was alone, with only Robert to turn to, but it was too late. Though Robert's story could soften even the hardest heart, he still faced jail time for taking the law into his own hands. Victor's connection to George Davies led to his arrest as well, exposing the twisted web of betrayal and revenge that had destroyed so many lives. Robert's greatest regret was being born into the Davies family. His ties to them marked the beginning of his undoing. The pain of his father standing by, silent and unmoved, as he suffered the trauma inflicted by his aunt, left Robert questioning his very identity. How could his family watch him break and do nothing? The sins of one person shattered the life of a man who had spent years building something beautiful, only to see it crumble into ashes. His heart, once full of hope, now carried the weight of betrayal and loss, a burden too heavy for any soul to bear. If you were Edward Davies, the younger brother of Robert Davies, would you seek revenge? Could you ever find it in your heart to forgive your family? Though revenge often leads to more hatred and violence, there are moments when the pain runs so deep that it feels like the only way out. But is it truly the answer? Or does it only trap you in a cycle of darkness? If this story shocked you, like and subscribe to the True Crime Arena for more tales that delve into the darkest corners of betrayal and human behavior.